Over the last few years, I've been into the hobby of game collecting, or at the very least I started buying more titles outside of franchises I had an immediate interest with, and stopped selling and trading in games I hadn't played for a while. It all starting with a desire to get at least one game from every series featured in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, which then evolved into getting every individual game referenced in the title, and then just grabbing whatever interested me at the time. Whilst this has introduced me to a good handful of titles I otherwise likely wouldn't have much interest in, some of which would become entry points to franchises I've come to really enjoy, it has also had the side effect of massively ballooning my backlog to unprecedented heights. So as part of an effort to finally start clearing through some of these games, I decided to start making videos out of the whole thing, where I can share some of my first impressions on titles that have otherwise just been stuck on my shelves collecting dust. And to serve as an introduction to the kind of stuff to expect, I took the approach of this episode being a random grab bag of 3 titles, all in different genres and with different critical receptions. With all of that out of the way, why don't you come along with me as I take my very first dive into the backlog. Let's start things off with our bad game of the day, with Mario Tennis Ultra Smash, which originally released in 2015 as a Wii U exclusive, and stands as the only Mario sports game that was released for the system, not counting entries in the Mario and Sonic series. Now, one thing you should know about me in general, and especially when I was younger, is that I didn't really like to go outside of my comfort zone, mostly just sticking with series I either already liked, were based on TV shows or movies I liked, or were games that I could tell from one ad I would already enjoy before putting the disc in the console. Because of that, a lot of my introductions to various genres would be from the various Mario spin-offs, whether that be racing, RPGs, parties. Hell, the only reason I ever picked up Super Smash Bros. Brawl and introduced myself to both the greater world of Nintendo's other franchises and fighting games in general was because it had Mario on the front cover. One of these other franchises was the Mario sports games, my younger self growing up with games like Mario Power Tennis on the GameCube, Strikers Charged Football and Sports Mix on the Wii, and Tennis Open on the 3DS. I simply couldn't get enough of these games. So why is it I never bothered with Ultra Smash? Well, there were 2 main factors. One is the fact that I already had my Mario-related Wii U fix with Super Mario Maker, which released the same year. I even pre-ordered the bundle that came with an amiibo, along with a Mario Maker pin and t-shirt. And 2, all the gaming YouTubers I watched at the time said the game sucked, and like most children, I blindly took their word as gospel without even considering the possibility they could be wrong. I would end up buying the game years later, mostly just so I could have a complete collection of all the console Mario Tennis games, though it's pretty much just sat on the shelf remaining untouched. But that all changes today as I finally put the disc in my Wii U to hit the court. So after getting past the title screen, I immediately came face to face with the main reason why people didn't like this game. That being, there's basically nothing here. The game overall consists of 5 modes, which will go in order of how I played them. First up being Mega Battle. This was the main game mode that most of the marketing revolved around, and it's basically just the same thing as the last game, which came out 3 years ago. But now you can occasionally grab the Mega Mushroom power-up from the new Super Mario Bros. Games, and all it really does is increase power and range for a limited time. You would think this is what the Ultra Smash in the game's title is referring to? No, that's just the name of a technique where you jump high in the air and slam the ball hard and fast with a flat shot. Other than that, it's basically just your standard tennis game, which are all effectively the same thing. Since tennis is one of those sports that's so simple, you kind of need to add gimmicks to it in order to make it even remotely interesting. However, Ultra Smash not only fails to add any interesting gimmicks outside of a power-up that doesn't really change the gameplay in any meaningful manner, it also just takes way too many steps back from previous titles, and you don't even need to compare it to when people reckon the series peaked with Power Tennis. You only need to look at the previous game, Tennis Open, to see that. As well as the game's courts didn't feature any special gimmicks outside of how hard the ball bounced and its speed, it still gave them unique themes with locales like the top of a giant mushroom, a desert, an iceberg, and Peach and Bowser's castles. Meanwhile, every single court in Ultra Smash is the exact same generic stadium design, but with a different floor, We've gone from them having no unique gimmicks to having practically nothing unique about them whatsoever. That is how low the bar has gotten, and Ultra Smash still failed to cross it. Not to mention in having less playable characters than Open, even when you don't include reskins that were locked behind QR codes, and Open already had less characters than Power Tennis. With Mega Battle failing to impress, I then moved on to Mega Ball Rally, which is just a rally mode, where the end goal is to just keep it up for as long as possible. And the closest it gets to doing something interesting is that the ball starts off big and progressively gets smaller. Moving on, next was the Knockout Challenge, which is pretty much the closest thing this game has to a single-player campaign. But unlike other games, which at least had you progress through a tournament to win a trophy, this is just an endurance test of how many tiebreaker matches you can win before losing. Not any actual matches or unique challenges to test you, just regular tiebreaker matches that are the exact same every time, the only real difference being who you play. Meaning after just a handful of matches, I got bored and stopped. After that was Classic Tennis, and it's literally just Mega Battle again, but with the Mega Mushrooms turned off, along with the option to also turn off the chance shots, or in other terms, something that in literally any other game would be an optional setting you can turn on or off, and not a completely separate mode. And then finally, there's online matches, which are completely useless now as the Wii U's online servers were shut down in April 2024. And I'm pretty sure that even when they were running, no one was playing this game online after discovering how underwhelming the offline content was. If there's anything nice I can say about this game, it's that it's still a functional way to play e-tennis, and I guess it was a decent enough base to eventually build aces? But at that point, you might as well praise the fact that the game doesn't cause the system to explode when you put the disc in. Ultra Smash is the textbook definition of doing the absolute bare minimum, and you can get far more from literally any other Mario sports game. The rest all having more characters, more interesting courts, more stuff to do than regular matches, ball rally, and tiebreaker eliminations, and all having far more impactful contributions to the series than this game could ever aspire to do. Assuming it even had aspirations outside of being a product to be sold. This is, without question, the worst Mario sports game I've ever played, and the only bright spot about my time with it is that I eventually got to play something better. Moving on to greener pastures, we have 2013's Wii Party U, which also came out on the Wii U, and if you can't tell what genre it's in, I am genuinely concerned for you. Now, the first Wii Party was one of those games I remember playing a few times at my nan's house, but if I had the option, I would usually choose to play Mario Party 8 instead. Whether that speaks to the game's quality or my devoted, loyalty to the funny Wahoo man, I'll let you decide. In fact, I'm confident in saying I have more memories of watching the Runaway Guys playthrough of Wii Party than actually playing the game myself. And their positive experience with Wii Party U was one of the main reasons as to why I picked it up, without also being the reason why it's currently the only Wii U entry from the greater Wii series I currently own, in combination with the fact that I don't really have the space to play Wii Fit U, and Wii Sports Club is frankly way too much money for what is effectively a HD remaster of the previous system's free packing game, which I could already play on the system. Now, Wii Party U was immediately making a much better impression than the last game, because it actually has more than 5 things to do, and the majority of them aren't just the same thing as each other with slightly different rules. However, I don't really have the time to play all of these, plus most of them are unsurprisingly meant to be played as part of a group session, so I decided to just stick with what I believe is supposed to be the main game mode, Highway Rollers, and for my character, I played as Yoro, and was put up against 3 of the Harbingers, Mariah, Joseph, and Zhu Ping. Apparently Death was busy that day. Now, if you're expecting this game mode to be just Mario Party but with Miis, you'd be half right. The game is split into two phases of rolling dice on a board and competing in various minigames, but the key difference is that there's no equivalent to Mario's stars and coins. Instead, this is more a straightforward race to the finish, with your performance in the minigames determining both the turn order and how many dice you get to roll during the board phase. First place getting 10, second place 7, third place 4, and last place only gets 2. In addition to all that, the board you're traveling across, while just being a straight line, or I guess a zigzag pattern with no divergent paths, it's still able to keep things interesting with various warp spaces that either send you forwards or back a set number of spaces, give you an additional roll of the dice in either direction, or just teleport you to another player's space, with there even being spots to specifically give the player in last place a boost, or the chance to roll extra dice by competing in a 1 vs 3 minigame, where the 1 plays using the Wii U gamepad. As for the minigame themselves, they're about on par with what you'd expect from a game like this, with a fairly wide variety of theming. This game mode alone seeing the plucky Euro take on the roles of chef, Colosseum combatant, figure skater, superhero, birdwatcher, toy car drifter, stalker, and cowboy. Truly a generational talent too gifted for this world. Couple all that in with the various dice challenges every 100 spaces, and some additional rules like the player in last getting 5 extra dice if they manage to roll doubles, and I feel like this game works as a great alternative for casual audiences who find Mario Party too challenging, while still maintaining a skill floor where the game doesn't break down into a purely luck-based affair, something that a lot of party games end up struggling with. In fact, I argue this game mode alone clears Mario Party 10 any day, and given that Wii Party U has 3 major sections, each of which have a variety of modes to choose from, compared to Mario's offerings of 3 modes, 2 of which are just slightly different versions of each other, and it honestly astounds me how Nintendo's Golden Boy fell this short when compared to a game that was primarily sold as part of Wii Remote bundles, especially when both games were made by the same developer, and this one came out 2 years earlier. So overall, whilst I definitely haven't experienced everything Wii Party U has to offer, and you likely won't get much out of it without at least one other person to play it with, I would definitely recommend at least giving the game a try. The only real barrier to entry that might stop you being that it's stuck on the Wii U. But hey, I'm sure there's a bunch of other games on the system worth getting, like Nintendo Land, Game & Wario, and anyway, on to the last one. To end things off today, we have the 2014 indie platformer Shovel Knight, or more accurately, Shovel Knight Treasure Trove, the game's new title being given to it in 2019 after it got various free updates that added 3 additional campaigns starring some of the game's bosses and a multiplayer battle mode. For this video, I've only played some of the earlier stages of the game's first and main campaign, which is now subtitled Shovel of Hope. Just for full transparency, I specifically played the Switch version of the game, but it's available on PC, 3DS, Wii U, PS3, PS4, PS Vita, Xbox One, and for some reason, Amazon Fire TV. I'm frankly shocked there's no support for Samsung smart fridges. Now, this is one of those games where I remember hearing a lot of YouTubers talking about how great it was, and how it was a very big event within the indie game space, though I never personally played it myself for the sole reason that I just don't play digital games. I'm not joking, I think it's a case of I've gotten so used to buying and playing physical games that whenever I buy a game digitally, I just end up forgetting that I own it. And whilst I would eventually get a physical copy of Shovel Knight, I think I just ended up being too distracted with other stuff I had around the same time, and just eventually forgot to ever get around to it. But that changes today, so let's see what we've got. Now, the game itself is very blatantly taking inspiration from the 8-bit era, especially the NES. 2 main attacks come from a mix of Zelda 2 and DuckTales, the level progression system seems to be a mix of Mario 3's Overworld and the boss stage format of a Mega Man game, and I was definitely getting some Castlevania vibes from Spectre Knight's stage. But despite the fact Shovel Knight wears its influences on its sleeve, I feel it does do enough different and mixes them together in such a fashion that it doesn't feel like just a watered down mishmash of concepts that are approaching the age of 40. which I know is something that games that typically go for this vibe can sometimes struggle with, where the game doesn't really succeed in differentiating itself from its inspirations, which is luckily something Shovel Knight doesn't struggle with. Plus, it helps the fact that the game itself is pretty fun. Granted, I didn't really get far for the sake of getting this video out in a somewhat timely manner, but from what I did experience, I can already tell this is something I'm going to be sinking more time into. Sorry if you were hoping for more details about this, but it's just inherently easier to explain why something is broken than it is to explain why something is working perfectly fine. Plus, unlike Wii Party U, which generally has a fairly mixed reception, this game has already been praised to high heavens from pretty much the entire gaming industry, with Shovel Knight himself kind of becoming an unofficial mascot for indie games as a whole, to the point he even got to appear as an assist trophy in Super Smash Bros., putting him on equal footing with characters like Waluigi, Knuckles, and Bomberman. So realistically, I can't really add much to the conversation other than saying, I also liked it, and you probably will as well if you're a fan of 2D platformers. It's nothing mind-blowing and doesn't really seem to do much that other games before it haven't done already, but it executes the ideas in a good way, and you can't really fault it for wearing its inspirations on its sleeve, when said inspirations are considered some of the best games of all time, and things you realistically should take inspiration from if you're making a game in this style. So yeah, overall, we had a very good 2D platformer, a surprisingly good party game that's unfortunately stuck on a dead system, and the cure for my insomnia. If you want to recommend any games for this series, I have a backlogged account. If you don't know what that is, it's basically the video game version of Letterboxd, where I track every game I own, along with what I have and haven't played. Only real rule I have for now is that I'd prefer to restrict this series to overall shorter experiences, so basically no slow burns or games where I need to play it for 10 to 20 hours before it gets any good. Otherwise, I'm happy to play whatever. Who knows, if it does well enough, maybe I'll eventually dedicate some episodes to one longer game. Or it could crash and burn and I'll never do another one of these again. Either way, any feedback, positive or negative, is appreciated, and I hope to see you in the next video, but until then, thanks for watching.